3 years after I walked out of my best friend's wedding toast and never came back. He showed up at my office with a manila envelope, a lawyer's business card, and a request that made me understand, finally, that some people never stop trying to use you. But to explain last Thursday, I have to take you back to the Saturday that broke everything. I met Zane in 3rd grade. He moved in 3 houses down, showed up on my porch with a beat-up basketball, and asked if I wanted to shoot around. We were inseparable after that. High school, college, shared apartments in our 20s, the whole thing. He was the kind of friend you stop counting favors with, because the relationship feels when my dad had a stroke in 2019. Zane drove 4 hours in a snowstorm to sit in the hospital waiting room with me. When his startup failed in 2021 and he lost most of his savings, I lent him $18,000 without a signed agreement. Because that's not what you do with a brother. He met my girlfriend, Claudia, at a cookout I hosted in April of that year. I'd been with her for 2 years. She was funny and sharp and I thought she was honest. We'd talked about moving in together. I'd looked at rings, not seriously, but I'd looked. The 3 of us hung out a lot that summer. That was my doing. I liked having the 2 most important people in my life in the same room. I thought I was building something. I was not building something. I found out the way you always find out things you weren't supposed to know. By accident, on a Thursday afternoon in October. I'd left my laptop at Zane's place the weekend before and finally went to pick it up. He'd given me a key 2 years earlier. I knocked, waited, let myself in when nobody answered. His apartment wasn't empty. I heard them before I saw anything. Came around the corner from the entryway and stopped cold. They didn't hear me come in. I stood there for probably 8 seconds, which is a very long time to stand somewhere you don't want to be. Then I left, pulled the door shut behind me, walked to my car, sat in the driver's seat for 20 minutes without starting the engine. My hands weren't shaking. That surprised me. I thought I'd feel something immediate and loud, but what I felt was very quiet. Like a switch had been thrown somewhere and everything went still. I drove to a hotel, checked in for 3 nights, told work I had a family thing. Didn't answer my phone. On the 2nd night, I made a list. It's a thing I do when I need to think clearly. I write things down, put them in columns. Column 1 was what I knew for certain. Column 2 was what I needed to figure out. Column 3 was what I was going to do. Column 3 took the longest. When I came home, Claudia was there. She'd been calling for 2 days, escalating from concerned to frantic. I think she'd convinced herself something had happened to me, which maybe made it easier for her when I walked in the door and she realized I wasn't hurt, just done. I didn't yell. I've never been a yeller. I told her what I saw, what day, what time. I told her I'd gone over to get my laptop. She went white, started talking before I finished. It was a mistake, it happened twice, no, 3 times, it didn't mean anything, she'd been going through something, she was going to end it. I asked her to leave, she cried, I waited, she left. Zane called me 22 times over the next 3 days. I didn't answer. On day 4 he texted, we need to talk, man, please. On day 5, I know I destroyed everything, I'm sorry, I don't know what else to say. On day 6, nothing. On day 7, a voicemail that I listened to once and then deleted. He sounded genuinely wrecked. I almost felt something about that. Almost. The hard part wasn't cutting off Zane. The hard part was our friends. We had a group, 6 of us who'd known each other since college, who shared a group chat, who had an annual camping trip every August. When people found out what happened, they didn't pick sides the way I expected them to. They tried to hold both. Kyle called and said he understood I was hurt, but hoped we could all eventually come back together. Meredith texted that Zane was going through a really dark period and had a lot of shame about it, and she thought I should know. My friend from work, Derek, who'd known Zane through me for 4 years, sent me a voice memo saying he supported me, but also that he thought Zane genuinely loved me like a brother and made a catastrophic mistake. And was I sure I wanted to blow up a friendship that had lasted 20 years over something that could be worked through? I didn't respond to any of them. Not in anger, just in clarity. I knew what I was going to do. I removed myself from the group chat. Declined the August camping trip. Let the silence speak. People stopped reaching out after a few weeks. That part was lonelier than I expected. You think you're cutting one person out, and you end up cutting a whole chapter of your life. But I'd learned something in that hotel room, staring at my list. There is no version of forgiveness that works if the people asking for it haven't earned it. Forgiveness isn't the same thing as reconciliation. I could forgive Zane eventually, privately on my own terms. That didn't mean I had to let him back in. I dated someone briefly in the spring, nothing serious. I moved to a new apartment in June, somewhere with less history. Got promoted at work in the fall. I work in commercial real estate finance, the kind of job that rewards you for being steady and reliable. Which it turned out, I was pretty good at being. I joined a running club, which sounds like a cliché thing to do after a betrayal but genuinely helped. I slept better. I thought about Zane less. By the following October, the 1-year mark, I didn't think about him at all on the actual anniversary. I noticed that on the day itself, that I'd gotten through it without noticing. And that felt like information. And then last Thursday happened. I was at my desk at 2:30 in the afternoon when my assistant told me there was someone in the lobby asking for me. No appointment. Said his name was Zane. I sat with that for a second. I went down. He looked worse than I'd expected. Thinner, tired around the eyes, wearing a blazer over a t-shirt, like he'd gotten halfway dressed for this meeting and lost steam. He was holding a manila envelope. He stood up when he saw me and the look on his face was hard to read. Not exactly guilty, not exactly pleading. Strategic maybe, calculated. I need to ask you something, he said, and I need you to hear me out. I didn't say anything, I just waited. Claudia and I broke up 6 months ago. He paused like that was supposed to land somewhere. I know that doesn't fix what happened. But I need you to know it didn't go the way she probably made it sound. I still didn't say anything. He held out the envelope. I'm in the middle of a divorce. I blinked. You got married. Last March. Someone else. It's complicated. He ran a hand over the back of his neck. The point is, there's a custody thing. And my attorney needs a character witness. Someone who's known me a long time. Someone credible. He tapped the envelope. There's a declaration in here. Just stating how long we've known each other. That kind of thing. I'm not asking you to lie about anything. There was a long silence. You came to my office, I said. You don't answer, is any other way to reach you? Zane. I kept my voice level. You slept with my girlfriend for 3 months while we were planning a future together. I found out by walking in on you. And you're here 3 years later, asking me to be a character witness. He had the grace to flinch. I know how this sounds. No, I said. I don't think you do. Because if you knew how this sounds, you wouldn't be here. He tried a different angle. We were like brothers for 20 years. Doesn't that count for anything? It did, I said. That's why this was as bad as it was. He looked down at the envelope, then back up at me. I'm not in a great place right now. The marriage, the custody stuff, the business has been struggling. He paused. I could really use someone in my corner. And there it was. That was the whole thing. He wasn't there to apologize. Not really. He was there because he needed something. And he'd run out of other options. And my name was still on his list of people who might say yes. I was the backup plan. I'd been positioned as the backup plan before and never knew it until now. How long were you and Claudia actually together? I asked. He hesitated. That hesitation was its own answer. Before you met at my cookout, I said. Or after? He looked at the floor. It's complicated. It's not, actually. I reached over and took the manila envelope out of his hand, not to keep it, just to set it on the lobby counter between us. I'm not going to sign that. I'm not going to testify. I'm not going to be in your corner. I understand you're still angry. I'm not angry. That was the truest thing I said to him that day. I'm just finished. I was finished 3 years ago. He stood there. I could see him working through options, trying to find the lever that would move me. You used to say I was the most loyal person you knew, he said. You were right, I said. That's exactly why I'm not doing this. I turned around, went back through the lobby doors, got in the elevator. Didn't look back to see if he was still standing there. My hands were steady the whole way up. Back at my desk, I sat for a few minutes before doing anything. My assistant knocked, asked if everything was okay. I told her yes and meant it. Then I called my attorney. Not because I thought I needed legal protection. I didn't. But because what Zane had said about their timeline was sitting with me. And I wanted to understand what I was actually dealing with. My attorney, a woman I'd hired to handle some property contracts, listened to the whole thing, asked 2 questions and told me that if he'd started contacting me at my workplace without prior relationship, I had grounds to send a formal cease and desist if it continued. I told her I didn't think it would continue. She told me to document it anyway. I went home that evening, made dinner, sat at my kitchen table and thought about the version of me who'd lent Zane $18,000 on a handshake. That guy had been so sure of himself. So sure he knew who the people around him were. I didn't feel angry at that guy. I felt something more like protective. He was trying to build something real and got handed a forgery. That's not his fault. I spent part of that evening digging through old emails and texts. Not obsessively, just methodically. Looking for dates. Looking for things I'd missed. I found a text from Zane in March of the year everything happened. About 2 weeks before my cookout where he met Claudia, for the first time. He'd texted me asking if he could bring a +1 to a dinner I was hosting. I'd said sure. Who? Texted back. Never mind. Plans changed. I remembered that exchange, and assumed it was just a date that fell through. I thought about that for a while. Then I thought about the $18,000. I hadn't had a signed agreement. Didn't matter legally. After the statute of limitations on verbal loans in my state, I'd looked it up once, out of curiosity, and then filed it away. But it mattered in the way things matter when you're keeping an honest accounting of what happened. I wasn't going to ask for it back. Not because he didn't owe it, but because the number felt small now against the actual cost of what he'd taken. There are things money can't quantify, and I'd already done the math on most of them. The next morning, I got an email from Zane. Subject line, "I'm sorry for coming to your office. That wasn't fair." Body, 3 paragraphs. I read them once. He said he was struggling, he said he'd made choices he regretted. He said he hoped someday I'd have room for him again. Even a small amount. He said he missed me. I closed the email, didn't delete it, filed it in a folder I'd made a long time ago and hadn't opened in years. The week after, Kyle called. First time in almost 2 years. He'd heard Zane had come to see me, didn't know the details, was checking in. I let it go to voicemail. His message was kind. He said he wasn't calling to advocate for anyone, just to say he thought about me and missed hanging out. He left his number even though I already had it, which was a very Kyle thing to do. I called him back the next day. We talked for 45 minutes. He didn't bring up Zane after the first minute. We talked about his job. His daughter, who was now almost 2. The fact that he'd gotten into woodworking over the pandemic and made a coffee table he was embarrassingly proud of. I told him about the running club, the promotion, the new apartment. Before we hung up, he said, "I'm glad you're doing well. For real." I believed him. Some people in your life are connected to a chapter that closes. Some people are connected to you. And the chapter just happened to be where you found them. Kyle was the second kind and I'd written him off as the first kind. And that was my mistake to sit with. There's a version of this story where I'm the cautionary tale. Where I cut everyone off and ended up alone and bitter. And eventually had to crawl back because isolation turned out to be worse than the alternative. I know that version. I've seen it play out with other people. It has a certain pull, even a logic to it, especially when you're in the middle of the first year and the silence gets heavy at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday. But that's not what happened. What happened is I rebuilt quietly. Different friends, same running club, a woman named Hazel. I met through a work conference who is steadier and more honest than anyone I've been with before. We've been together 14 months. She knows the Zane story in broad strokes. She didn't offer therapy talk or a hot take. She just said, "That sounds like it cost you a lot." And I said yes. And she said, "But you figured it out." And I said yes again. And that was somehow exactly enough. Last week, someone in the running club, a guy named Patrick who I've gotten close to in the past year, asked me how I knew when a friendship was actually over versus when you were just in a rough patch. I thought about it. When you stop wanting it to be different, I said, not because you stopped caring, because you finally understand that what you were caring about was the idea of the person, not the actual person. He nodded like that made sense. It made sense to me too, but it took 3 years, and a lobby confrontation, and a manila envelope to get there. The envelope is still at the front desk of my building. I told my assistant to toss it when I went back upstairs. Whether she did or kept it or Zane took it when he left, I don't know. I didn't follow up. It wasn't mine to deal with. None of it was mine to deal with. That's the thing nobody tells you when you're in the middle of the hurt. You keep trying to find the action that makes it stop, the conversation that finally fixes it, the explanation that makes everything make sense. And the thing that actually works is so much quieter and less dramatic than any of that. It's just stopping. Removing your energy from the equation. Letting people have the consequences of their own choices, without you softening the landing. Zane is somewhere dealing with a divorce and a custody hearing and a struggling business, and $18,000 he borrowed from someone who no longer speaks to him. Those are his problems to carry. I set them down a long time ago. I have a condo I like, work I'm good at, a woman who tells me the truth, a running route I could do in my sleep, a friend named Patrick who asks real questions, and an honest accounting of how I got here. That's enough. Most days, it's more than enough, and I've never been tempted, not once, to go back.